For New York City FC, the first leg of preseason complete. The second leg at the Coachella Invitational in California coming up beginning next week. And later in our Kicking It Around segment, the first of a 4-part series, getting to know your commentators on NYCFC Views.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. NYCFC Views.
Collins approaches the shot, and New York City wins the first MLS Cup on their first try, and they're going crazy. Tiene tiro y gol! Gol! New York City es el campeón de Major League Soccer!
The sickest New York City FC podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Glenn Crooks along with Roberto Abramowitz. And then later, Roberto, I think this is one thing I threatened to do last year, but let's do it this year now that we've got the Sick Podcast, NYCFC Views. We're going to feature each of the 4 commentators that do the radio coverage for New York City FC. You do it. I do it. Ariel Hudas works with you. And Maddie Lawrence is going to kick us off today, my broadcast partner. And the thing I've told you all along, and I've said to all 4 of you, I mean, you each have such fascinating stories. And I think a lot of the people that listen to us and hear from us on Twitter when we are talking about the club know very little about us. So I think it would be, I'm looking forward to learning more about all of you too. So that'll be a little bit later on.
And we're going to learn about you as well. You get the spotlight shine on yourself too. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, you're going to be doing the interviewing of me. So make sure you prepare. I don't want any winging it.
It's going to be the best 3-minute interview ever. I promise you.
All right. Well, New York City, we're going to get to Maddie a little bit later on, completed their second scrimmage. The Philadelphia Union, the opponent, we don't know really much about it except for the final score. It was 1-0 in favor of City at the half. We don't know who scored the goal, and that was not disclosed. And then Philadelphia scored 3 times in the second half, so 3-1 the final. Nick Cushing did about a 27-second post-game thing where he said a lot of young players came in for the second half. But we don't know any specifics. We don't know who started. The one thing I remember about the short bit of highlights that they did show. So there was a highlight package, but none of the goals were shown. So we just don't know. But that Maximo Carrizo got the ball in the midfield, passed it out wide left, nice, firm, accurate pass to Malachi Jones, the number 1 draft pick who recently signed. And he got a pretty good shot on goal. I think Andre Blake had to come up with a save there. So that's all I could take away, Roberto. I don't know if you gleaned anything else from anybody.
No. Look, the team doesn't want us to know what happened, and fine. I'm not going to talk about it then. As far as we know, according to the Philadelphia Union, they lost. Philadelphia won 3-1. That's all I know, and they don't want us to talk about it. I'm not talking about it. I mean, there's nothing to say.
Barcelona
it's a
game
anyway. I'm not going to glean anything out of a preseason game, any preseason game for that matter. I'm not gleaming it. You're not unless you find some amazing individual performance from some guy who you didn't know about or had not gotten a chance. It is what it is, and I'm not going crazy over it. We'll start. What is it, February 24th? Then we'll figure stuff out. Well, actually, in Coachella, those games are on TV, so those will glean a little bit more.
Yeah, these first 2 scrimmages were closed door. Barcelona from Guayaquil, Ecuador. That was a 1-0 defeat. And then the 3-1 loss. And the thing when I get out to Coachella next week, I'll ask about the goals and see if we can, get any information on that. But more so is, the club announced earlier this.
I just don't get it, Glenn. I mean, I seriously don't get it. I mean, what are you hiding? I mean, Philadelphia saw everything you did. But what are you hiding?
Well, that's what
I don't get it. I mean, it's not only NYC. There's a lot of teams that do the same thing, and I just don't get it. It's a preseason game. It's a chance to talk about the team,
but we
did promote the team, and to get it, to get people excited.
I understand, but we scrimmage in college. Even we would scrimmage teams either preseason or in the spring, And there are times when I'd have agreements with the opponent not to share, because there's all kinds of sharing of film, and we
Okay.
would have this agreement not to share the film. It was just
Okay.
the two teams getting together, and we're doing whatever we're trying to do, especially in the preseason, and then that becomes, it was in essence closed door.
Let me ask you a question from reporter to coach. Okay. What affected you? Now, your season runs what? August to December, right? Okay. College season runs
Yeah.
August to December.
Yeah.
What did you do in the preseason? Okay. In July and beginning of August. Okay. That somewhere in the middle of late October, beginning of November, you were able to do that surprise the opposition. And had you not done that in preseason and hid it from everybody, that wouldn't have resulted.
Well, the first thing I think of is set pieces, because if you're playing an opponent that you're not going to see during the regular year on the collegiate level, then and what you do is you take the set pieces maybe consecutive times. It's a controlled scrimmage too, so you can do things like that. I have no idea if either of these first two scrimmages were of the control variety, where maybe you could have multiple opportunities to do things just to train from it. Probably not. But those are the kinds of things that might, and the emergence of freshmen, and in the case of a professional team, it's the young players that maybe some of the opponents don't know as much about. Look, I don't agree with closed door. I think I told you last week. If teams want to do a closed door scrimmage, give them one in the preseason. And this could come from a mandate from MLS. And then the rest of them have to be streamed or talked about, because the supporters are the ones that are mightily interested in this. I'm sure it's very good news that they'll be able to see these Coachella games. And I'm pretty happy to say that I'm going to be doing the color commentary on all three of those games.
That's
Jose,
really cool.
And
but see, I don't like my thing is, okay, and this is from a layman's perspective, because I have no coaching background or real playing background. Okay. So from a layman's perspective of what advantage you can gain from this, I look at other sports, okay? And I understand that you have close practices, and you have close practices every single week, and you open it up one day for media to see what's going on, to do interviews, and the rest of the time everything's closed except for the first 15 minutes. But look, nobody shows up anyway for that, okay? So everything else is closed, and I get that, all right? I get that. I don't fully agree with it, but fine, I get it. In these practices, I mean, there's no other sport that does this, okay? There's no other sport. Spring training is open. They sell tickets to every single game. The NFL preseason, although it's been shortened, is open. NHL, NBA preseason, it's open. I mean, I don't get the secrecy of this. Like, all of a sudden, they're going to do something that reinvents soccer that is going to give them a huge advantage just as they're going into the playoffs or about to try to advance to the playoffs.
Well,
I don't get it.
Let's ask Nick directly at some point this year, maybe early on. And
I will, because I want to know what advantage they can glean, because I don't. So maybe it's just my own stupidity, and I don't understand it, and it's me.
It's
because it's a big deal.
Maybe Matty Lawrence can shed some light on it when we bring him in a little bit later.
We'll interrogate him.
So 2 matches played, 2 losses. It's just the preseason, and I remember your comment from a week ago about the fact that you don't care about results in preseason, and I understand what you were saying, and I kind of countered that by saying, maybe early on, but as it progresses, and when you get out to Coachella near the end of those, like the third game against the Galaxy, and then a closed door against Austin FC on February 17th, I think results could be important. So I brought this up at the last presser, Nick Cushing and Keaton Parks. So okay. I talked about learning how to win, and honestly, Nick, his first comment to me was like, well, I disagree that we need to learn to win because of how the end of the season went. They finished the season with a victory against Chicago at Citi Field. We know that it wasn't enough to get them into the playoffs. And then Keaton Parks was also asked the same question. So let's run that and then get your comments, Roberto.
Clear plan of this preseason. 1, of the team that we want to be, and 2, of how we're going to get there. And I think one of the challenges of not making playoffs is the amount of time that you have off from November right the way through until a pre-season that starts in the second week of January. So I think one of the main things for us is this camp was about getting the physical base in. It's about making sure if we want to be a more aggressive team with the ball and without the ball, that we have to really stress the physical side of each individual's game and give us the best chance to go to Coachella and play a games program where we can start to hone the tactical side and real hone the ideas. And as we go closer, through these games, of course, winning becomes something that is a huge desire of ours because, as you know yourself, confidence and momentum and just trying to gain some real success out of the concepts of how you want your team to play. Of course, winning is important to us. But
I do, yes. I think in the past, our preseasons have been good, have been bad. We've won, we've lost, but I think it would be good to carry some momentum out of preseason into the season and just get everybody on the same page that we're going out to win every game. This isn't, we're not still warming up as the start of the season takes off. And I think it'll be good for us to get in that mindset of just finishing games and winning games, whatever it takes. And so, yeah, hopefully we can bring that out of everybody by the end of this preseason so that we're ready to go day one.
So I think Keaton, more so than Nick, put an emphasis on really winning these games and winning them in a way that probably games were lost last year. But just before you comment, Roberto, 9 wins total this season ago. That is the fewest in franchise history, including the expansion season when it was 10 wins. And last year, the only season other than 2015 where New York City missed the playoffs. Only one of those 9 wins was on the road. Only Toronto had a worse road record or win road record. Now, we could look at it also over the last 5 matches, it was 3 wins. One of those wins against Toronto, which played like a mid-level USL championship game. That game was just at Red Bull Arena it was a pitiful performance, but you still soundly beat them, which is what you're supposed to do. So they got that done. Beat Chicago at home to end the season. The most impressive win in that run, Roberto, you might remember, is Orlando. That was at Citi Field, 2-0. That was a very good game. But a must-win at DC United, second to last game of the season. And one of the poorer performances, down that last third of the season, a 2-0 loss. So that's kind of why I brought it up, because I don't know. It's I see what Parks is saying, and he's one of the leaders. So I think it's going to be pretty important that they get some results here.
I think that it really depends on the team. Okay, so if I want to put a little caveat to what I said, it really depends on the team. If you have a young team that you're putting together that maybe doesn't have the right mentality, then maybe you have to emphasize that a little bit so they get used to winning and they can show. But a veteran team in New York City, although it's sort of young, it was one of the youngest teams last year, is still a veteran team in many ways. And look, I think you look more for winning individual battles. Who's going to be your left back? Who is going to be, whatever position that you think that, needs shoring up. And I think that winds up being more important. And, you can look at the NFL, and I don't have the stats right in front of me. And I'm sure that it's littered with teams that win in the preseason and do absolutely nothing during the regular season and vice versa. So I don't think it's that important to win. Maybe in some individual cases, it might be a little bit more than in most. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is finding out who you really have individually, who are the players that are going to help you, what are the tactics that are going to help you. And maybe you don't deploy them throughout the, entirely throughout a game because you want to try different tactics. This is when you get to experiment, right? So you want to try different tactics. You want to see which ones work, which ones don't, and which ones you can adjust.
But that's if you listen back to what Nick said. He said these early stages, it's really getting the physical together and then the game method together, and then trying to now put it together at Coachella where it's looking the way you want it. And that's why, to me, it's a gradual process. I think they've got a great plan for preseason. I don't think the results in these first 2 games is that vital. I don't think the result against San Jose on February 7th is going to be vital. But then Portland and then the LA Galaxy, as you're moving closer almost a week prior to the season, I just think you need to be scoring some goals too. And there's apparently a new assistant coach on the way. We're going to get to that in just a moment.
Well,
But again,
let me just put one more thing, okay? So, like, I've been watching the Premiership, and I'm starting to see a lot of teams using a new system, which is 3-3-2-2. All right. And so maybe one of those Coachella games, as you're putting your team together, maybe that's something that you try for a half just to see how the team does it, right? You obviously you practice it and all that, but then you install it in a half because you want to see how it actually works out against another team. And so that's an opportunity to do that because you're not going to do that game one starting in Charlotte on February 24th. That's what to me is more important.
I have that's funny. Last night, I got up in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep. You know, that happens every now and then. And I started thinking, I put out a lineup with a shape, and it's a 3-back shape. All right. I wish I could, if I had the board here, I'm going to bring that thing out. Maybe it's at Coachella, maybe when I get back. But it's 3 at the back.
You're going to be the soccer Katie Porter?
Well, it's yeah. Well, no, I'm not, I don't think I won't have any quips like she does. I don't think
she's brilliant.
Yeah. So I thought, you know, everything I'm thinking about is Sands, Parks, and Perea on the field at the same time. So how do you set up with those 3 on the field at the same time? You could leave Sands in the hole and play twin 8s with Parks and Perea. You can do that. But where does that leave Santi Rodriguez? Now, is he on the left? And does that eliminate someone else? I came up with this 3, put Kevin O'Toole on the left and make him, you know, he's a wing back, but he's maybe a little bit more defensive. Julian Fernandez on the right as a wing and keep his heels on the opposite touchline. Get him the ball in 1v1 situations. And then you've got, so the shape is well, not really similar to the 3-2-2-2, but it's really a 3-4-3 where you have Rodriguez kind of connecting with Monsef Bakrar up there. But you've got, I think that the one thing I'd like to see more of this year is that they isolate the guys that need to be isolated. We saw what Gabby Pereira could do when he had room. And Julian Fernandez is in that kind of same mold, I think, when he's isolated.
What about Magno? Do you have him in your starting 11?
Not at the moment, but I don't know how preseason's going. I mean, I haven't seen a thing.
We haven't seen.
Yeah,
exactly. We haven't seen anything.
It's hard to say, but I'm thinking, you know, Sands can fall into the back line. You got Tavon Gray and Burke Risa right and left as central backs, but they can step into those gaps in front of the wide areas. And I really was going through it pretty carefully, but also, you know, I can have fun with it because, you know, it's not my team. And if it doesn't work out, I don't get, crucified for it. So
no, that's Nick's job. There hasn't been a Crooks out hashtag yet. Maybe Maddie would start one. I don't know.
Maybe it'll start after that system and that personnel. I don't know. Hey, player news, but before one CF Montreal bit of player news. Joseph Martinez. I don't think this has been officially announced, but Joseph Martinez, according to reports, is going to go to CF Montreal. So that's pretty interesting.
It is. I mean, the thing is, what version of Joseph Martinez are we going to see? Because, I mean, the one at the beginning of the season with Inter Miami seemed to be slow and out of step. A little bit better once Messi got there. But, hell, Messi could make even you a good player. So we'll see how that works out. But Montreal seems to be trying to improve a lot after a bad season last year. So we'll see what happens with them.
All right. So New York City player news. Hannes Wolf trying to he's still not here in the country. So there's some question as to whether he'll arrive in Coachella in time to play games. And of course, that's a visa issue. I went on his Instagram since, you know, it seems like everybody gets information from these players on Instagram. So I thought, all right, let me go on there. Let's see what he's talking about. So he didn't have anything up there other than pictures. But I went through all his pictures over the last, I don't know, couple of years. And there must be 50 of them, him playing with a ball at his feet. And only twice did I see him using his right foot. So this guy is dominant left. And it'll be interesting to see if he gets more time on the right as a wing or on the left. But first, they've got to get him in and get him acclimated and all those things. So that hasn't happened yet. There is some very definitive information on Twitter from NYCFC source who oftentimes is accurate. A 22-year-old center forward, Jovan Mijatovic, who is, according to the reports, is going to be signed by Manchester City and then go on loan to New York City until the summer. But he's a pretty good goal scorer. He has 4 goals, 2 assists in his last 4 matches played for Red Star Belgrade. And they're second in the table in the Serbian top league.
See, so I don't get that. I don't get that. I can understand if somebody
that's
comes in for the summer.
That's not coming from the club. Again, this is
no. I know this is from internet. This is we're speculating on speculation. Right. So I don't get the point, okay, of the report that says it's 6 months, so like from here to summer. Now, I understand it from Manchester City's point of view. I don't understand it from New York City's point of view. I can understand if a player comes in like Angelino did, all right, and in the summer transfer window and plays, 4 months and then, goes away. I get that. I don't get you bringing somebody in for the beginning of the season knowing that he's leaving midseason. I just don't get that.
About that too.
I think that if he comes, he should at least stay the entire season. And we'll see if he does come, what winds up happening. But if it's just 6 months and he leaves in the summer transfer window, I absolutely don't get that. I don't know I don't think there's a benefit really for New York City. I mean, unless he's scoring a goal every day and it sets him up, for the rest of the season. But it doesn't make sense to me.
No, it's a bit awkward if it comes out that way. But let's say he scores 8 goals by the summer, and New York City's in good shape in the Eastern Conference. And then it also allows them, in addition to Monsef Bakar and Gabe Siegel, to acquire a striker in the transfer window, the secondary window. Then you're almost replacing him. And what Manchester City is thinking here is that New York City, working under the same sort of method and system, they're going to help prepare him for them. But he's a center forward. He's not beating out Erling Haaland, so I don't know. I don't know.
I get that. Now, the other thing is that realistically, even if they bring in a center forward in the summer transfer window, like they did last time, it takes time to acclimate to MLS. There are very few players in the history of this league that go and hit the ground running and are seamlessly fit in and become major contributors. It normally takes time. It may even take the entire, half of the season for somebody to contribute, and they start contributing the following season. It takes a while. So, I wouldn't be getting my hopes up for something like that. But I'm just adding some context to it. We have absolutely no idea. The club won't say anything. We actually haven't even asked the club.
Yeah, so,
no confirmation. There's no. We've learned not to ask anymore.
And the 19-year-old winger, Augustin Ojeda, that's another one that seems imminent. And by the way, Ojeda and Mijatovic, one of the reasons that one of the things, and I talked about Instagram, they both just started following the official NYCFC Instagram account. So that's one of the reasons.
Giveaway.
So
it's a done deal.
It's unless they just all of a sudden saw, I don't know, an old clip of NYC and say, hey, man, I'd like to follow them.
All right, let me give you some info on him, okay? So his valuation went up from like $250,000 last July to about $3 million now. Racing played yesterday against Tigre. They won 3-0. He wasn't in the starting lineup, and he definitely wasn't on the bench either. He's 19 years old. Born June 19th in 2004. He can play 3 positions, but mostly he's played left wing. He's played some right wing and some midfield. So that's basically what he's done as far as his numbers are concerned, including cup games and Copa Libertadores and all of this stuff. He's played a total of 24 games. He's got 3 goals, 2 assists in 1,154 minutes.
All right, and he's also, I did a screenshot of this from Hudson River Blue. They took it from one of these many analytics sites, but this has to do with his pace. This is a CIES Football OBS, U20 in 36 leagues. That's U20 players in 36 leagues, and Ojeda was ranked 9th out of that whole group of players. Interesting to see Caleb Wiley, Atlanta United, number 3rd overall. But this just kind of shows he's got a little pace too. In the event, it does culminate and come together that the 19-year-old winger who grew up in Rosario would come in. The other thing about Mijatovic that I wanted to mention is that he played in the Champions League match against Manchester City for Belgrade, and it was a 3-2 loss at home for Belgrade. But so he's had that kind of experience as well. MD Myers transferred from NYCFC 2 to the Charleston Battery of the USL Championship. That's I think that's good news for MD Myers. He's going to a very, very good coach, Ben Perman at Charleston. He's done a fantastic job. So MD Myers will develop there because he's got a good head coach. And that's a team that got to the championship game last year, lost to Phoenix Rising in the USL Championship. So that's some, he was a Golden Boot winner last year in MLS Next Pro, and now he's USL Championship. And then
good for him. I hope he does well.
Yeah, assistant coach position has been open since the departure of Kleberson, and according to Joshua Cloak of The Athletic rarely gets these things wrong. New York City is going to name Leon Hapgood. I would imagine not many, if any, have heard of him before, but he's had great success in the Canadian Premier League with Cavalry FC. They've won the last 2 Shields in the CPL, and he's been technical director and assistant coach of that team during that period of time. Cloak described that team, Cavalry, as creative and attacking oriented. So all
right, that's what we want to hear.
If he's in, then I suppose that's going to be one of his jobs to add to the creativity. League's Cup opponents were announced this week, Roberto.
Yes.
Did you see that? So what do you think?
Yes, I did.
What do you think? It's FC Cincinnati
I'm disappointed.
Querétaro. Is that the way I pronounce it, right? Querétaro?
Querétaro, yeah. That's very good.
By
the way, lovely city, about 2 hours away from Mexico City by car. It really is. They have a beautiful stadium that looks like Estadio Azteca, but only 35,000 people. They rarely fill it up, sadly. This is a team that had all of its fans banned. And they were trying to force the owners to sell the team after their supporters attacked Atlas supporters in Querétaro during one of their games. It was sort of like they were in social media, threatening each other. And then the Atlas supporters went, and then the Querétaro supporters basically, started a fight. It was horrific, just really terrible stuff there. And then the team was supposed to be forced to be sold, and they were supposed to be moved. Never happened. And then late or mid-season in their last season, they finally started allowing fans back in. They haven't been a very good team. So as far as that's concerned, I mean, New York City, should beat them. I haven't really seen where they are in the.
They're in the bottom.
In the
they're
standings
bottom third,
this year.
They're bottom third of the table. FC Cincinnati, and it's of note. We're not going to Mexico because all the games are going to be played. In North America again. So
right. So New York City will visit FC Cincinnati and play at home against Querétaro, and then we'll see what happens after that. They've changed the format a little bit this year, so where it's more regionalized. So the Mexican teams don't have to travel as much. Like Monterrey, I think, traveled something like 4,000 miles, which was outrageous. And I'm sure that it wound up affecting them as far as, how they perform. So it's a little bit more even, although I still feel that they should seed everybody. And if a Mexican team is better seeded than an American team, let's play the game in Mexico. I think eventually that actually helps American teams going forward, because they should learn how to play some of these games in hostile territory. And trust me, there's a difference between, playing a game, let's say for New York City in Red Bull Arena, which is probably the most hostile place that they'll face, versus playing playing in Estadio Azteca against America, although Azteca now, as of this is the last game they'll play in Azteca until after the World Cup. it's being remodeled. So America has one more game against Monterrey there, and then they close it down. Or playing in a place like Guadalajara or Monterrey or Tigres. Which,
Understood.
I
Well,
love this.
speaking of the Athletic, read the story about Cade Cowell, who left the friendly confines of San Jose to play at Chivas, and it's really great because he talks very much about how uncomfortable it is, but how that will help with his development. One more thing before we get to Maddie, Roberto, the away kit apparently has been revealed. This was like a game or something that put it out. But
EA Sports, it used to be called FIFA, no longer is. And they accidentally seem to have leaked all the away uniforms. So if it's accurate, because we don't know if it's accurate or not, but if it is, that's a pretty smart looking uniform. But what you can't see is like any of the details, because normally it's just not a solid black. It has a whole bunch of details and that make it fun. But I like the fact that the crest is blue and Airways is blue. I think that makes it cool. We'll see if that's a real one, and if it is, probably buying one.
It looks like the Mets to me, but I know it's not. So it's and as you know,
the
Roberto,
Mets do have a uniform. They share the New York City colors.
I put this up here just for you and for supporters that might like that, because I don't care about kits. Gosh, I don't care about kits. I just don't care about kits. But I care about Maddie Lawrence. So let's go kicking it around. Roberto, what do you say? All right, as I teased at the top of the show, we're going to feature each of the commentators that bring you the radio coverage here for New York City FC. And we're going to kick off this week with my co-commentator, the color analyst, Matthew Lawrence, otherwise known as Matty Lawrence. I don't want to call him Shaggy. I don't think you like that nickname, do you?
I'm not if you've seen the haircut I had on the top of my head when I was called Shaggy. Yeah, it's.
I did. We've got some pictures of you, but we don't have that one. But yeah, that was. Well, Matty, great to see you again, and I think we're both really interested in. Look, the number of times, it's almost embarrassing. The number of times that we've gone out to dinner or sat in the pub, and I'm sure I haven't asked you all the questions that I probably should have about your fascinating career. But let's just tell everybody: Fulham, Millwall, Crystal Palace. Just and there were others as well. Started at Wycombe, I think. Over 650 professional matches played in England. Millwall Player of the Year in 2001, a year that saw Millwall promoted to the top tier of England football. Finalists in the 2004 FA Cup against Manchester United. In all, Matty played 228 games at Millwall. Came to the States to play at Hartwick College. He's a Hall of Famer there, but that one time that was a national power, Hartwick, which no longer has Division I soccer now. And so that's just kind of a snapshot. And Matty, I guess, I think we really want to start to get to know you by just talking about where you grew up and how soccer hungry you were from the outset based on your community and your family.
I grew up in a town called Rushden, which is in Northamptonshire. Northamptonshire being the county of Northamptonshire, which is the equivalent of a state. So the equivalent of your New Jersey or your New York state, obviously. It was a cobbling town. It was, the capital, really, I guess, of Northamptonshire is Northampton Town. They're called the Cobblers. So it's a shoemaking industry, or it was back then. Most of my school friends' parents worked in the shoe industry, worked in shoe factories. And obviously, as we grew older and things changed, the manufacturing of shoes no longer occurred in England and it occurred elsewhere. So the factories all shut down probably when I was a teenager, and many of my friends' parents lost their jobs or had to seek jobs elsewhere. Wow. So it's become quite a desolate town. And my dad just forwarded me a BBC News article on our town where we used to live, Rushden, and that says it's been there's been too much bad behaviour going on there, and a lot of social misbehaviour, not in terms of murders or drug dealing per se, but in terms of littering, drinking in the streets, urination in public. It's just got out of control in terms of there's nothing to do there. Like so many towns where there used to be, manufacturing shoes, or it used to be a cotton industry, or it used to be mining, they're now desolate, and with desolation comes destitution as well. And there's very, very few things to do. My mum and dad got out of Rushden about the same time I did. I was 18 years old, as you said, when I came to the United States of America. My mum and dad left about a year later, and I've never been back since. And I don't mind saying that I don't think I'm missing a great deal. I think it's a big shame for people who still remain there, obviously. But yeah, it's not somewhere that I look on fondly in terms of now, but certainly growing up as a kid, it's where I learned to play football. It's where I smashed my ball against the wall time and time again out in front of my mum and dad's house. Quite often would probably miss and hit the next door neighbour's window as well. They got to know me too. But yeah, that's just what I did. And that's what I did for so long. There was no such thing as under fives football or under sixes football. I didn't start playing really until I got to junior school when I was 7, 8 years old. And then even then we weren't really allowed to join the team because we were so young. But, I think I got special dispensation when I was 7 or 8 to join the team, and kind of flourished from there. We had a wonderful PE teacher, phys ed teacher. His name was Alan Cox, and he didn't teach me everything I know, but he taught me everything I knew from the ages of 7 to 11, obviously with my parents as well, of course, but he was the one true person who stands out at a very early age.
Matt, I have this fascination about, how did you find out about the United States as far as an opportunity to be able to go to college? How did that whole thing start? Because it's not exactly a very well-known path for English soccer players to come to the United States. So how did that work out? Or when was the first time that you heard about college soccer in the U.S. and you developed an interest and then somehow were able to make it happen and come over here?
Look, so I was graduating from high school sort of in the late 80s, early 90s. And obviously we graduate from high school at 16, not at 18. So then we have another 2 years of college before you guys do. So we have up to 16 is high school, then 16 to 18 is college, where we do something called A-levels, which is separate. Most people leave school, or a lot of people leave school at 16, or they could back then anyway. It's changed since. So in that 16 to 18-year-old age range, I didn't get picked up by a professional club. I was very small in stature, and in terms of back end of the 1980s, that's a big problem. Probably is still a too big a problem in England right now, because we always look towards physicality a little bit too much. And certainly I got bypassed. So I went to school or went to college, carried on my full-time education. And when I was there, I became very aware that maybe smarter kids were coming to America. Kids who hadn't quite made the progression to the professional game would come over to the States and let's be honest, for a free education. If you were good, you came over and you got a full scholarship, hopefully at a Division 1 school, if not a Division 2 or Division 3, obviously, or a junior college. And I did become aware of that. And we did actually have a booklet that you could send in, or I could send, I forget how much money it was, £500, and send in a profile of myself just in booklet form. There was no videos, there was no DVDs back then, just in black and white form. And a company sent this booklet over to the United States so coaches could get a look at it. Obviously, they wouldn't take you from this booklet. They would then have to come over to England to watch games. Again, very few games, I'm sure Glenn will attest to this, very few games would have been broadcast that you could see from England and broadcast in the United States. Nowadays, you can do it. Nowadays,
or vice versa, getting a chance to see the college that you're going to. You had no idea.
Absolutely. And look, so I did have that intimation that I wanted to come over, and then I did start growing. Then I did get caught up with my peers, and I was lucky enough to play for the England schoolboys under-18 team. So it wasn't the England pro under-18 team. It was only available to anybody in full-time education, but still the whole of England, still 60 million people in England. And we have lots of, smarter not that you can always believe it when we talk about sportsmen or athletes or jocks, whatever you will. There are actually some smart athletes out there. So when I was at the England schoolboy trials, it was the last 30. Glenn Meyernick, who I'm sure you guys know, who's sadly passed since. Glenn Meyernick came over, who was the assistant manager or assistant coach for Hartwick College, and he watched my last 30 trials for the England schoolboys and offered me a full scholarship on the spot. Pretty much as we were walking up the path towards our dorm room, he said, like what I see, to myself and to Ian McIntyre, who is now the head coach of Syracuse University, who Glenn has had on his show on Sirius before, and has actually been on the broadcast for NYCFC with us as well. So Ian and I were pretty much offered full scholarships there and then. And, you know, the rest is history in terms of what I did in the United States, I guess.
I wonder, along the way, so you started playing professionally just about the time MLS was born, maybe a couple of years prior to that. Were there ever any notions to try for MLS? Were you ever scouted or did anything like that?
No, I think there was an MLS draft in 1996. So what I did, I was supposed to graduate in June 1996, but because I did those extra 2 years of schooling back in England between 16 and 18, I got a bunch of credits. So I was able to speed along my degree course, and I graduated at Christmas 1995. So I took myself out of the draft by coming home, and I gave myself between Christmas 95 and June 96 to become a professional footballer. If I hadn't made it, I was coming back to do my master's, wherever that may have been, maybe be a coach, maybe be part of the MLS draft. But look, at that inauguration of MLS in 1996, what were there, 10 teams? Yeah. Players were getting paid $13,000 a year. It just wasn't even on my radar at all. And when I got back home, I was very lucky that I played for a good non-league team called Grays Athletic in Essex. And I think I played 6 games for them. And within 2 months, I'd signed professionally for Wycombe Wanderers. So I came back to England December 21st, 1995, and I'd signed professionally by February the 21st, 1996. Obviously, that's down to my ability, but also down to a lot of luck, Glenn. There's lots of players who are very, very good playing in non-league football. I just happened to be playing in a league in Essex, which is very close to London, where we had scouts at every single game. And I know, Glenn, I'm sure you read the statistics out. Back then, I could actually score goals. I scored 4 goals in 6 games. And that led me to being watched more thoroughly. I was playing as a central midfielder, an attacking midfielder. And Wycombe were the first team to offer me a trial. I went on trial, scored a goal and assist in the first game. I played for them, their reserve team. And as I say, that's history. That's how my pro career started.
Let me ask you this. So you were at Millwall, right? Started, what was it, in 2000, and you stayed there for 6 years. So you were voted Player of the Year, right? And you were promoted to Division 1 as champions of the 2000-2001 season, right? Yeah. So you started out really well in the 2001-2002 season, but then you sustained a concussion, okay? Do you blame the concussion for having accepted a role as color commentator with New York City to work with Glenn exclusively? Do you blame that?
It wasn't the initial concussion that forced me to work with Glenn. It was the secondary concussion that came after that. So yeah, unfortunately, I was out for about 3 months, and we're joking about this. We also, and I know you know, Roberto, concussions are a serious issue.
Absolutely.
But yes, I have to admit that, the last loss of brain cells has forced me into this work.
Well, I think it's a good time just to quickly bring up. So Shane is our producer. Shane, put that caricature up of Maddie and I working together. A local artist here in Jersey did this. How good is that?
That is awesome.
It's spot on for certain.
And the strokes, I mean, that's perfect. Jersey strong, that's perfect. I don't know how the New Yorkers will receive that, but anyway. All right, get rid of that. We got to go. Hold
on. Give Gina some credit for crying out loud.
All right, put it back up.
Put it back up. Hold on, because this is brilliant.
It's Gina Minchino.
There you go. Awesome.
And she and I have thrown some other work her way too. So we'll hopefully, she does great work, and I didn't give her much. I just gave her a picture, and she put the headsets and did the rest.
How much did she have? Did you have to pay her to slim you down as much as she did?
Oh, come on! I'm look at me.
I am, Glenn. That's why I'm saying it.
Hey, I'm on my special high sugar diet now, man. I'm eating a lot less.
Yeah,
and drinking.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing the new you,
Okay.
and then you'll be shocked when you see the new me. So,
all right, let's get back to Millwall, Maddie. And I want to ask you. You have to give us like a scene setter for this one game in particular. I mean, there were, and I would like to ask you outside of this game what your memories of Millwall are, because you were, you're a really, really highly regarded figure in that club, and you became really popular there. And but you played Manchester United in the FA Cup final. And show this picture, Shane. So this is Manchester United with a very young Cristiano Ronaldo. And there you are, little screenshot off the. You can go on YouTube and watch this game. It's what year is it? 2001?
2004.
2004. That's right, 2004.
You're not even looking at him. You're ignoring him totally. I see.
Yeah.
That. You focus.
On purpose. That's why. It didn't
That's
help.
awesome. Now, Ronaldo did score a headed goal. I hope you weren't the one marking him on that. And then Ruud van Nistelrooy had a pair goal, I guess one for the penalty spot, but it was 3-0 the final. But what are your, you have to look back fondly at that, even though it was a loss and didn't go as well as you would have liked.
Yeah, look, I look back on it fondly now. It's 20 years, in the rearview mirror. It's taken me a long time to get accustomed to not admitting that it happened, because it's a wonderful thing that it happened, but the loss, and admitting that I could enjoy the occasion, can I say. I didn't enjoy the game, obviously, because we lost 3-0, but enjoying the occasion and being able to look back on it fondly and, show my kids the game and realise that there's very few people in the world, probably I think about 250 people in the world, who have captained their team at an FA Cup final. So whether we lost or not, I found it very hard to appreciate the nature of the game and how lucky I was to be a captain. Whereas previously I've always said it's only the semi-final that I care about, because we won the semi-final. We beat Sunderland at Old Trafford. Old Trafford, obviously the home of Man United, but it was a neutral venue for the semi-finals back then. And so we won that. And I've always thought of that as my favourite game because we won. But I think I'm doing myself a disservice and the manner of the game and the magnitude of the game as well. But it's taken a couple of decades, and that's truthful. It's taken me this long to really recognise what a wonderful achievement it was.
It's an amazing achievement. Just I'm thinking about this as you're talking about it. And I mean, obviously you were a huge underdog in that game. And the fact that you were able to go there and it's a full stadium, it's the FA Cup final. I mean, that is an amazing achievement that your team is able to get there. I can only think of positives. Yes, I understand you wind up losing the game, but I mean, just being there is just an amazing accomplishment. And having captained that team, I mean, that's admirable.
Yeah, look, as an athlete, though, everything's about winning. It doesn't matter about the situation, how many fans are there. It doesn't matter that you're playing Man United. And yes, of course, they're better than you. We were also not only the underdogs, but we were undermanned as well. I was lucky enough to be captain that day because our captain snapped his leg in the semi-final. So we were not only underdogs because we were a lower league team, championship team as opposed to Premier League. We also had at least 3 injuries, I think a suspension as well. So it was not, I don't want to say nigh impossible for us to win, but it certainly would have been very, very difficult against a team with, Tim Howard in goal, with Roy Keane playing, with Paul Scholes playing, with Ryan Giggs playing, with Van Nistelrooy, Ronaldo. I can't list any more, but I think that's enough. They probably could have played against us and won anyway.
You mentioned Tim Howard, and Casey Keller famously played for Millwall, and he had some amazing stories about the fans there. Give us one from your perspective of something that was crazy that the fans would do, because I know that they're a very, I'll say this politely, intimidating bunch.
Yeah, look, I've got one story that shows that paints fans in a bad light, because I feel at times you have to do that, and that's fans anywhere around the world. But also,
Yes.
before I go there, I will start with, I met the most wonderful people at Millwall. I really did, and I know that they have this image of being hardcore, and I know there's this no one likes us, we don't care image, but that's partly where Millwall is in terms of in Bermondsey, and a very working class area in London, and they've always been the underdog, I guess, in a way. But I met some of the best people working behind the scenes and fans. I've met at least one Millwall fan who Glenn knows, Pat Brennan, who Glenn has worked with his son Brian on Sirius, and I met him just through Twitter in Hell's Kitchen probably about 15 years ago now. We've stayed friends ever since. And it's stories like that the fans, they really are, and I know a bit of a cliche, salt of the earth characters. They're truly wonderful. And anytime I go back to Millwall, I get, it's not just about the free tickets, but I can phone up and get free tickets. Just the other day at Christmas, I sent my eldest daughter and my eldest son to go to Millwall, and they were looked after. I wasn't even there. They just had to turn up, say who they were, their names were on the guest list, and they got in. And that's not just about freebies. I'm talking about the fact that I'm lucky to have the respect of the fans and people behind the scenes at Millwall. So let's start out with that. That is the best thing about Millwall fans. You won't hear that enough as well. Once you're in that clique, if you will, once you're in that circle of trust with Millwall fans, you're almost never forgotten. And let's not forget, I'm a player who left Millwall and went to Crystal Palace, one of their arch rivals, and yet still, granted, some fans don't look on that particularly fondly, and understand why, but most fans have really treated me incredibly well. On the flip side, I'm sure something that you can go on YouTube or go online and see is when we lost out to Birmingham City at the Den. It was the game where you could get promoted to the Premier League. Actually, it's the semi-finals before going to the next game where you can get promoted to the Premier League. And we lost to Birmingham, I think, in injury time. And Glenn will be able to tell us that Stern John was the goal scorer for Birmingham City, who I then actually went on and played with, I think, for Crystal Palace. But yeah, we lost that game, and we were then held within the stadium. That's both sets of players and many fans, because pretty much the local neighbourhood got burnt down that night by the Millwall fans, and I was left in the ground with my family, with my kids until like 2-3 in the morning. So it would be remiss of me not to say that there were bad things that happened, at the hands of Millwall fans, but also it's very much overlooked at the very good things that happened. So I'll end on a good note. Very rarely is it mentioned how much good work Millwall fans do for charity, for hospitable causes, especially for the British Army as well. They're very much a team or a bunch of fans who will get behind the country in a patriotic manner, and in a good sense, not in a bad sense. I mean, in a good sense. And so, yeah, every single day really that I had at Millwall, I looked on very fondly.
One final note about your playing career is Crystal Palace. You worked under a number of managers over the years, obviously,
yeah. But
Neil Warnock to me is the most intriguing because he's a bit of a polarizing figure when you hear about it. The modern managers feel like, Neil would never change and do any of this analytics stuff, and he would throw that to the side. We don't need that. But tell us about your experience with Neil Warnock.
So talking about old school, let's just start with, I think it's only Neil Warnock and Sir Alex Ferguson who have been allowed to manage in the Premier League without having their pro license or working their way towards the pro license, because they're so old school, because so old or elderly as well. Let's suppose the pro license wasn't even around when they were growing up. So they had special dispensation to not even be working towards it. So he is old school. He is very old school, and he's happy to admit it as well. I remember his team talk. The first day he showed up at Crystal Palace, the chairman introduced him, obviously, And then Neil said, that the gaffer, as we would call him then, the gaffer said, go and put your boots and your shin pads on and meet me out there on the pitch. And nobody ever wore shin pads in training sessions. So everyone's looking around and going, oh my goodness, what's going on here? So we went out to the centre of the pitch. He brought the goals up about 30 yards. And the pitch was probably about 50, 60 yards long and probably about 30, 40 yards wide. But it was 11v11, so very compact. The goalkeepers had to throw the ball into the centre forward, and it was pretty much survival of the fittest. Anybody who watches WWE, it's like the Royal Rumble, and that's what he wanted. He very much wanted that. He wanted to see who would sink or swim in a very tight-knit environment when everybody was kicking the proverbial out of each other, and that's the type of manager he was. Then at the end of the session, he said, and most people were battered and bruised, he said, and he admitted this as well. He said, I'm not really somebody who knows a great deal about tactics. He said, that's for these guys, and pointed to his assistant managers. I'm all about, I'm paraphrasing now, but I'm about psychology and man management, and you will all love playing for me more than you've liked playing for any manager ever anywhere around the world. And we had Belgian players, we had French players, we had Australian players. I think we had at least one or two Aussies. Yeah, so we had many players from many different cultures, and I think most players will admit they like working for Neil Warnock because he would look after you as a footballer and as an individual as well, and he knew how to treat people. He would always shout at the people he knew he could shout at. So there was a group of us. It was me, Danny Butterfield, Clint Hill, Sean Derry, who he knew he could shout at us because we had the ability to take that on board. So even if Danny Butterfield had scored a hat-trick, before half-time, he got shouted at because Neil Warnock knew he could handle it. And at least one of the players, and I'll say it, and I don't mind saying, Darren Ambrose, was needed a little more hugs and kisses, if you will, and an arm round him, a metaphorical and literal arm round him. So, Darren could have the worst game in the world, could have picked up a yellow card, not touched the ball all game, and Neil Warnock would come in at half-time, clap and say, you're the best player in the world. That's why I love you, Darren, you're the best player. It's all, and I'm sure I'm over-elaborating a bit, but he had that ability to work out who he could treat and how he could treat each individual person. And I think that goes for any line of work, certainly for any sport anyway, any team sport, that's honest. And
you and Maxime Chanot have that in common. You both played for Neil Warnock. I think Maxime played for him at Sheffield United. Yeah. So there you go. And now maybe you could become a coach at Maxime's little academy, La Fabrique, in Brooklyn. Well, Matty,
he's going to have to dress better. For sure, he's going to have to dress better. Chanot is a fashion plate, without a doubt. Matty likes to be comfortable. Let me put it that way.
Very well put, Roberto. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, Matty, that was wonderful, and I know Roberto. I'm sure we both learned quite a bit there about our colleague and friend Matty Lawrence. Why don't you hang out for these next two stories and kicking it around? And one involves Girona and Man City. Now, interesting, they're both City Football Group clubs. So Mark Ogden from ESPN wrote this story, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know this. And under the current guidelines, okay, because they're owned by the same group, if Girona wins La Liga, which is certainly a possibility, and Manchester City finishes in the number 2 or 3 position in the EPL, Man City would not play in Champions League next year because you can't. If they won the Premier League, Man City, then yeah, the winner goes no matter what. But if they finish second or below, they wouldn't be able to go under the current guidelines. And the quote from Mark Ogden: if Girona win La Liga and City fail to retain their Premier League title, it could be the catalyst for significant changes in the rules and regulations governing multi-club ownership. Pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah, it is. Look, and it's only normally in the US that you see teams tanking because they want a higher draft pick. Do you think that there may be a team tanking in Girona? If so, they can't win. I'm sure it won't, and I'm joking slightly. I didn't know that this was a rule. I thought it was a rule that if the same ownership group owned a team or owns the majority of them, I didn't think that both of them could play within the same competition, I must admit. But I didn't realize they could still both qualify. If they both win the league, they're both allowed to play. I'm surprised at that, I must admit.
Yeah,
I'm wondering that if that happens, or it's close to happening, that if the City Group doesn't sell their share of the team because they don't own the whole team. I think they own less than 50%. So I would think that they would sell their other 50% one way or the other. So that wouldn't happen.
And an interesting side note, Per Guardiola, Pep's brother, is the chairman of Girona. Then Pep, of course, the manager at Man City. All right, one other story. And I find this to me, this was the story of the week, guys, is that there's a match in Belgium that is going to be replayed because of VAR error. Did you guys see this?
I did, yeah.
I did.
So Genk appealed that the rules were misapplied and they should have been able to redo a penalty saved by Kasper Schmeichel of Anderlecht, as both teams encroached on the penalty. And the rule clearly states if both teams encroach, whether the kick is made or saved or hits whatever, it has to be retaken. And it was not. And therefore, Genk appealed. I think the game ended in a draw. And the game is going to be replayed because of VAR error. Could that be precedent setting? That's what I'm thinking, you know?
I like it. I'm in favor. Obviously, with a crowded schedule, that's it becomes difficult. But I think that that's the right outcome. I think that that's the right thing to do.
Well, the trouble is with the precedent setting, and we could end up with lots of games being replayed. I think for something that obvious, I don't see the problem apart from just the stacking up of games. Because even with VAR, we've seen around the world that there's been more than just that occasion where VAR hasn't been used properly. But I guess it's just the fact that the laws weren't applied correctly in this manner.
One other thing folks should know about Matty is he does the broadcast for a lot of Argentinian top-tier football. And before we depart, Matty, I wanted to see, look, some reports say that this is pending, the signing of 19-year-old winger Agustin Ojeda from Racing Club. You've seen him play. Can you give us a bit of a scout, and maybe we'll get something more thorough from you if it actually happens, but what do you think?
Look, first and foremost, I'd like it known that he's exactly 3 decades younger than me. He's got exactly the same birthday, June the 19th, 2004. I'm June the 19th, 1974. So let's get that out of the way first. He's exactly 3 decades younger than me. But I couldn't even, honestly, Glenn, I've worked last year, 2023, I worked 122 Argentine games. 2022, I worked about 120 Argentine games. This time, so far in 2024, I've probably worked about 15. So that's nigh on 250 games, and I can't give you a scouting report. I know that's sitting on the fence. He's played so little. I've worked numerous Racing games. I worked the Racing game last night, as Roberto said. Racing won 3-0 against Tigre. My assumption is he wasn't on the bench because this move is that imminent. He may not even have been in Argentina. And this is just me guessing. I'm not saying this has happened. I'm not saying he's going to sign. But look, Roberto read out the statistics. He still has only just played over 1,000 minutes of football, which is really 10, 11 games at most if he plays all 90 minutes or 12, 13. So, yeah, I don't know enough about him to offer up a good scouting report. I will go back and have a look. But at most, I will have seen him in fits and starts coming off the bench, and I just don't know enough about him. I saw way more of Julian Fernandez than I have done of Agustin Ojeda. So, I was happy to give a scouting report of Fernandez, not so much with Ojeda.
All right. Well, finally, at the top of the broadcast, we talked about the importance of winning in preseason. Got comments from Nick Cushing and Keaton Parks. And I asked you before this podcast last week, Matty, about it because I knew it was going to come up. And what was your response to that? Because I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, certainly I've been in teams where we won every game of pre-season and we got relegated. And then I've been in teams that lost every game of pre-season and we won the championship or we got promoted. So it's not imperative that you win games of football, but it does depend. I think you guys were alluding to it. It does depend which team it is and who's within that team. This is a team, we're talking about NYCFC, who only won 26% of their games in MLS last season. So for me, going into the season now, I think it's important that they learn how to score goals and they learn how to win games of football. I don't mean learn, they know how to, but get back used to it. These behind closed doors friendlies, they're anomalies, but the closer we get to this regular season starting, I said to you, Glenn, the two behind closed doors, I'd play 30 minutes in those when I was a pro. Then the next game you want to play 45, then the next one 60, then the next one 75. The last game of pre-season, I would always want to play 90 minutes. Granted, I never wanted to get injured, of course, but I'd want to play 90 minutes and I'd want to win the game, of course. You want to win that game in your last game before going into the season. Are the results per se important? Of course not. I could show you the Millwall team probably where we got promoted, or I think we got promoted twice, but certainly we didn't do very well in pre-season. But we knew within our dressing room that we had a bunch of leaders and we had a real nucleus of a very strong, mentally tough team. And I'm not sure we saw that with NYCFC during 2023.
Let me ask you this. Is 5 preseason games enough to get ready for the regular season? I know that it's just pretty much the same for everybody, but is 5 preseason games enough?
So certainly I would play 6 or 7 games. And as I say, it would be...
I think the accurate number, if I could interrupt, it is 6, because you're forgetting the closed door against Austin on February 17th. So there's 3 at Coachella, Austin,
okay.
and they played 2. So it will be 6.
I think it depends on each individual player. As I say, I would like to do, I would have done 130 in one game, 130 in another, then a 45, then a 60, then a 75, then a 90. So however many that is, 6 or 7 would be what I would want to do. But again, you wouldn't play anywhere near 6 or 7 90 minutes. You'd only be playing a microcosm of some of the games, certainly the early ones. And we did the same. We would have behind closed doors friendlies for maybe our first 1 or 2 games, that's for sure, in pre-season.
Well, great stuff, gentlemen. Part 2 of our series of Get to Know Your Commentators is going to be next week. Ariel Hudis, he'll be in the hot seat next week, so we learn about his upbringing. And he's Ariel. I can't wait to talk to him and get some of his South American takes along the way. But Maddie, wonderful to see you. Roberto, you as well. And that's going to do it for us. So for Maddie Lawrence and Roberto Abramowitz, I'm Glenn Crooks, and this has been NYCFC Views.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast NYCFC Views on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.